So I've been hearing a lot about this new Linux distribution that was developed by a Microsoft developer, somebody that actually works currently at Microsoft. He's created a Linux distribution and it's designed to attract people that are used to Windows 11 and transition them over to Linux, because he's created this Linux distribution that should mimic and look and feel kind of like Microsoft Windows 11. And this all sounds very suspicious to me, right? Is this an actual Linux distribution, or is this some kind of Microsoft honeypot where they're trying to basically try to get to all of you Linux users because they want to data mine you and spy on you and everything for if you use Windows, right? But those of us that don't use Windows, how are they going to get to us? Well, they want to create their own Linux distribution, possibly a conspiracy theory, right? Yeah, it could be, but you also now, I have noticed that all of a sudden this AnduinOS distribution that I never heard of until a couple of days ago, all of a sudden there's news articles everywhere about it and YouTube videos about it. It's almost like there's some kind of money behind it, like there's a campaign possibly from Microsoft. Is Microsoft paying all of these journalists and YouTube reviewers and things, all these people? Is Microsoft actually paying people to talk about AnduinOS? Did Microsoft pay me to make this video about AnduinOS? You guys know I do not take corporate money, so obviously I didn't take any money from Microsoft. Of course, if I was one of those people that would take money from Microsoft, then I'd still answer no to the question. I'd just lie to you. But let's go ahead and take a quick first look at AnduinOS. So the very first thing I did is, of course, I went to their website because I didn't know too much about this, but AnduinOS 1.0. So it just saw a 1.0 release September of last year. They also had more recent releases. Matter of fact, over on DistroWatch, I noticed that they had had a release here in the last week or two. So I went and grabbed the latest ISO. One other thing I noticed is some of the tags here at the top of the page. One of them is open source and then free and then GPL v3 license. So that is an actual step in the right direction. The fact that this project does tout that it is free and open source and that it is actually GPL v3 license. I did verify that. I went to the GitHub page for AnduinOS and it is actually licensed under the GPL. Good job, because I kind of expected it to be under not necessarily a proprietary license, but I thought maybe they would license it under a more permissive free license like MIT, which Microsoft typically does license a lot of their stuff under MIT if they're doing open source, but I'm happy that they went with the GPL. One thing to note about the developer behind AnduinOS, he works at Microsoft, but he does not work on Windows. Microsoft is a gigantic company and most employees at Microsoft don't actually work on Windows, and he's one of those people that doesn't work on Windows. Why choose AnduinOS here? It's because it's ready to use. The ISO is only 2 gigabytes inside, so it's not a terribly big or bloated distribution. It's based on Ubuntu. Ubuntu itself is not terribly big or bloated, typically, unless you're adding a bunch of extra stuff on top of it. It has a friendly interface. They're going to use the GNOME desktop. Now, of course, you get privacy and open source, containerized. Now, this is interesting because I'm not sure everyone's going to love this. Graphical applications are installed via Flatpak and keep themselves separate from the base system. So I don't know why you wouldn't use native Ubuntu packaging, right? Why are you going with Flatpak? Of course, Ubuntu also already has snaps if you wanted to do the whole containerized thing. It just seems like a strange choice. By the way, this distribution is based on, actually, when I say it's an Ubuntu-based distribution, it's actually based on Debian. They do add some Ubuntu repositories on top of it. So you can kind of say it's based on both Debian and Ubuntu. You've got 3 different versions here. You've got an old LTS based on Jammy Jellyfish. You've got a recent LTS of Noble Numbat, and then Plucky Puffin is based on Ubuntu 2504. I actually downloaded this, and I'm going to go ahead and spin up a virtual machine and check out AnduinOS inside of VM. Now, I've already run through an installation of AnduinOS. It uses the standard Ubuntu installer, and by Ubuntu installer, I mean the old Ubuntu installer, the Ubiquity installer, which is a fine installer. Of course, Ubuntu now has a new Flutter-based installation application that they use, but this is still using the tried and true Ubiquity installer. It installed just fine, nothing to see in the installation. But, on first login, and this is my first time logging in and actually checking this out, Now, I've got to say, it does look very Windows-like. You have not a Windows-like background. I mean, it's Windows-like, but it's not the same as the Windows 11 wallpaper, probably for copyright reasons. I know some distributions get a little loose with trademarks and copyrights, and they use a lot of images and icons and things that, are directly ripped from Microsoft Windows. Thankfully, we're not doing anything here. There should be no legal problems with this distribution, but we have a Windows-like wallpaper. We have a panel, our GNOME panel here at the bottom of the screen, just like your panel on Windows is at the bottom of the screen. We have our start menu, if you will, that is right here. And then we have our quick launchers, our taskbar, essentially, that is all centered on the panel, which I'm not a fan of centering things on the panel, especially things that you're going to be clicking all the time. Most things that happen on modern applications, especially web browsers, they always happen on the left-hand side of the screen. Your forward and back buttons are at the top left. So putting things at the bottom and center, especially something like the menu, which you would click all the time, you're going to be traveling a lot from the top of the screen, especially when you're using things like a web browser, all the way to the bottom of the screen to click on things if you're a mouse user. So just for, I understand aesthetics, I guess it might look good, but as far as just mouse travel and just being easy on your hands and on your wrists, I think this is a poor choice. But again, the aim of this distribution is to actually mimic Windows 11, which if that's your goal, it's done this pretty well. Some other things on the panel, we have our little weather widget here, and this is actually kind of cool. It says I'm in San Francisco. Of course, I'm not in San Francisco. It's 14 degrees. I'm assuming it's not 14 degrees Fahrenheit in San Francisco. US obviously uses Fahrenheit. I'm assuming this is defaulting to Celsius temperatures as well. So you got some work to do as far as changing the settings here. I'm not going to do that as far as, sharing geolocation of exactly where I'm at. So I'm not going to actually configure this widget, but this is a nice widget. I actually really think this is sharp, having that weather widget here. I think already, just the very first thing I look at, I'm impressed that they've included that. I'm assuming that's a GNOME extension. Some other things you have over here in this area, let me move my head out of the way. We have what looks to be a sys tray, and of course your standard kind of GNOME sys tray, where you can switch, for example, the style from dark to light. You've got some networking stuff going on as well. I'm not going to play with any of that. And then of course you have your clock. If I click on the clock, we get our calendar and we get our notifications. Let's see what's installed out of the box, because they talk about this being kind of a minimal, lightweight distribution. As far as the ISO is not very big. So let's go ahead and do all apps. Let's see, back. Yeah, is this actually all the applications? If this is all the applications, this is actually pretty awesome, because, it's going to let you, I guess, install the applications you actually want to run. It just has a few basic things. Of course, it's got the Firefox web browser, which also has a quick launcher down here, but let's launch Firefox. And let's go ahead and check what version of Firefox we are on. If I go to Help and About Firefox, this is Firefox 138, and I'm assuming that was installed as a Flatpak. I wonder if I can open a terminal here. Control-Alt-T does actually open a terminal, and let me zoom in here. If I do a Flatpak list, let's actually just quickly see if there's anything installed as a Flatpak. Where is Flatpak? So Flatpak is here, but Flatpak list doesn't actually list anything. So I thought they said all the graphical applications would be installed as a Flatpak. I guess, is that going forward? Is everything a native package on here at first? Let me actually do a apt list -i for apt list, and then just the installed packages. It's going to give me everything that's installed. And if I let me up arrow and grep for Firefox, let's just see what package Firefox was installed via the apt package manager. You can see there is Firefox. So it was not installed as a snap. It was not installed as a Flatpak. Snap is probably not even here if they've got Flatpaks enabled. Yeah, snapd is not even on the system. So Flatpak is here, but nothing out of the box is installed as a Flatpak. Back to the menu system, files. I'm assuming that is GNOME's Nautilus file manager, and it is a okay file manager, nothing wrong with it. And we also have console. Console, of course, was the terminal, and if I click on it, it's back into the terminal. I noticed it remembered that I zoomed in, right? Because I had zoomed in earlier. If I zoom back out, let me, there we go. I had to remember the key binding. And then let me exit. And if I Control-Alt-T to launch the terminal again, yeah, it remembers that. Zoom back out, exit, Control-Alt-T. Yeah, that is neat. I have never seen a terminal remember if you were zoomed in or not on exit. So I don't know if that's strictly a console feature or if they've done any additional work to that, but that is actually very nice. Then we have our software center. I actually do want to play with this. Let's actually install something and actually see if we do actually get Flatpaks. So let's install, I don't know, something that's probably not here out of the box, GIMP. GIMP's kind of a big program, but let's go ahead and install it. Yeah, it's going to default to installing it from FlatHub. You do have the option, though, to install the deb package, so I'm glad that that is here as well, because probably most people will probably want the native packages for most things, because especially if you're running something like Ubuntu, you're not necessarily wanting a rolling release. You're not wanting packages that auto-update. Typically, for most things, some things you may want things that are constantly rolling, like your web browser. It's kind of important to have an up-to-date web browser, but for things like, GIMP, for example, I just give me the latest version that's in the Ubuntu repos, and I really don't need a container for that. Back to the menu system, we have Shotwell for our image viewer, our photo organizer, if you will. Camera. What the hell is camera? It's such a generic name. GNOME really makes me mad with these names. It's camera 47.beta. That's not the actual binary name of this program. I have no idea what the actual name is, but it doesn't matter. If GNOME doesn't want to take the names of their applications seriously, then I'm not going to take it seriously either. We also have weather. No, GNOME weather. Welcome to weather. I'm not going to set that up. Text editor. Yeah, is this gedit? Let's see. If I go to About Text Editor, this is not gedit, it's just Text Editor. The GNOME project text editor. Yeah. Now, anyway, there's not really much here. They do install my favorite calculator program, Calculate, which is a GTK application. This is much better than the standard GNOME calculator. This is Calculate GTK 5.5.1. That is a really smart choice, so I've got to give the Anduin dev credit for that. I think that's a really smart choice. Events is our PDF viewer, GNOME videos for playing video. Rhythmbox is our music player. I think that's a smart choice as well. I go into the menu system and About Rhythmbox. This is 3.4.8. A music manager and playback software for GNOME. Let's close that window. And other than that, we have some system settings tools. So let's actually go into the settings here. And if I go all the way down and go to System, and if I go into About, this is Anduin 1.3.0. I gave this system 6 gigs of RAM. I gave this virtual machine 20 gigs of space as well. I was going to see if it gave any details about, GNOME as far as what version we're on. We're obviously using Wayland. Other than that, you know what? I'll just go to the terminal for a lot of this stuff. It'll make my life easier. Let's first run htop. Let's see what kind of system resources we're using. Now, I did just open and close a lot of things, so this may be a little higher than, say, a fresh, cold reboot, but right now it's using not much CPU, and then the RAM, it's using about 1.1 gigs of RAM. That's pretty standard for GNOME. Let's check what kernel we have installed. If I do a uname-r, this is kernel 6.14.0. Now that is interesting that htop was installed out of the box. Ubuntu typically doesn't install. There's two things I always complain about. htop, it's not installed out of the box on Ubuntu, and Vim. It's Vim here. If I do a Vim on the .bashrc, Vim is not installed. So that's one thing I think the AnduinOS devs probably should add, is add a real text editor. I'm sure Nano is here. Nano is not something that a lot of, especially power users, are going to want. Leave Nano on the system for people that want it, but install Vim. People will complain if Vim's not there. One last thing I want to do, let's check out the wallpapers that are installed out of the box. So if I right click on the desktop and go to change background, let's see if they include any cool wallpapers. They do not. They have a light and a dark version. So if I change from dark mode to light mode, we get a different wallpaper to fit the light theme. Although to be honest, I would rather do the dark wallpaper with the light theme. And for dark mode, I would actually rather do the light wallpaper with the dark theme. For me, I like the contrast, but I understand a lot of people want dark on dark. So yeah, and that's probably the way I would run it. I actually do quite like the default theming here in AnduinOS. So there you have it, a quick and cursory look at AnduinOS. Fine distribution, those few minutes I spent with it. It's Ubuntu-based. Ubuntu's a fine distribution, so I'm sure AnduinOS is solid as far as if you actually wanted to install it and run it. I'm sure there wouldn't be, any kind of major hiccups or anything. And I was kind of joking earlier. I know this is not a Microsoft honeypot. It's not some kind of secret plan to get at us Linux users and steal all our data. At least I was paid to say that. Now, before I go, I need to actually thank my producers. I need to thank these guys here. Matt, Steve, 40mm, Cap Caveman, Darla, Flea, Jersey Killer, Mark, Methos, Arion, Paul, Peace, Arch, and Fedora, Realities for Less, Red Prophet, Roland, More Gentoo, Ubuntu, Willie, and Microsoft. I'd also like to thank each and every one of these fine ladies and gentlemen as well. All these names you're seeing on the screen right now, these are all my supporters over on Patreon. Well, these guys, this quick look at AnduinOS would not have been possible. If you like my work, want to see more videos about Linux and free and open source software like AnduinOS, subscribe to DistroTube over on Patreon. Peace, guys.